My name is Julian Nick. I'm from the Allen Ryan People's Community Defense Brigade. We're here to set up our tent city and have a conference. The way the conference is going to work is we're going to start with a cultural event, which we already had. A friend of ours from Colombia who's here under death threat from the paramilitaries presented a cultural hip-hop song. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have different presentations about the problems people are facing. Then we're going to break up into groups. The presentations will include everything from solutions to the problems we're facing to like the struggle in the factories with the workers, to the struggles on the street that street workers face, the struggles that addicts face. And then after this we're going to come break up into discussion groups, come up with proposals, present the proposals back, and tomorrow we're going to come up with a list of what we're going to do to fight these things. We're going to start with Hillary, who's a comrade of ours, and she's going to talk about life on the street as a woman, as a drug user, and as a street worker. And she's also going to talk about the fact that street workers in Kitchener are currently being killed and no one really gives a fuck because they're seen as non-humans, right? Because the way it is people use the word outlaw, and the history of the word outlaw means to be outside of the law. If you're outside of the law, you're outside of the protection of the law, which means you can be killed, you can be raped, you can fucking be brutalized, you can be shot and murdered like our friend Bo Baker, and it doesn't matter because we're outside the law. So this is a gathering of real fucking outlaws, and we're going to get started with our friend here.
Hi, I'm a street worker. I currently suffer addictions from opiates and meth, and also a lot of us workers out there, we struggle from people looking at us differently, and the cops constantly harassing us, kicking us out of places, and being homeless. There's nowhere to sleep. You're constantly being kicked out of somewhere, or you're trespassing, as they say it, and you can't even go to like a school park or whatever and sleep, and it's pretty sad. Like, you fucking don't have any place to go. And like, my friend Kelsey Falconer was killed a few years back. Her torso was found in the garbage. She was cut up into pieces, and now we suffer that problem again because someone happened to give one of the guys AIDS, and now they want to chop up the downtown girls and apparently sell them to a buyer that wants to do whatever it is with whatever. But it's pretty gruesome, and it's pretty sad how like the downtown core has to be like it. The homeless has to be looked at as like someone that can't be trusted or whatever, and that's not the case. Like, you can't judge somebody by their cover, So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
A few questions. How do you feel the police is responding to the fact that like these women are being murdered and attacked?
Well, they're not. Like, they just drive by, really. Like, it's not like they really do too much. Like, one of the girls had reported this issue, and nothing has been done about it. The guys have drove down King Street. They've taken pictures of the downtown girls, the working girls. I don't know why the pictures. They've tried to pick up 4 of the downtown girls. So yeah, they're not doing nothing.
What role does addiction play in all of this?
Well, see, addiction, we have to support our addiction somehow, some way. And to support our addiction, this is what we have to do. We have to work as a, well, sex trade workers.
What are some of the deeper issues that like women face? Like, what are some of the problems other than getting murdered that they face in terms of STDs, in terms of support to deal with STDs, in terms of money to pay for antibiotics, in terms of like day to day life like that?
Well, there is the public health that does give out condoms, lube, and all that kind of stuff. There are the van, the sanguine van, but um, whether they would use it or not, I personally do. But catching STDs and STIs and whatever, uh, it can easily happen. And whether like it, you can't always depend on condoms to be 100% um, like safe, and you can't depend on all that. But yeah, a lot of people sometimes don't use them, but like the amount of money it costs for the antibiotics and stuff like that. If you're not on welfare, how are you gonna pay for that, right? And sometimes I know when I got cut off of welfare, I was on street allowance, and street allowance was like $300, and it was like crazy. And at the time, I didn't have my health card renewed, so I couldn't even like get my like methadone or anything like that because they wanted me to pay for it. So you know it's very costly, and yeah, that's all.
What do you think about the idea of a drop in center where there is a safe injection site, where there's alternatives for people who haven't started drugs so they don't get involved in drugs, where there's treatment for those that seek treatment? Uh, what can such a place offer street workers, and what sort of services would street workers need?
Well, actually, I think that would be a great idea because there's been many issues with rigs and everything been found on the ground. And personally, I had lost my kid because of someone leaving their dirty rigs around. And you know and so I definitely think that a place like that would be a great idea because it's just crazy the amount of addicts that use, and they don't care where they use, and depending on how high they are, they can't be conscious of what they're doing or whatever, so they're not in the correct mindset to put their shit away and whatever. And if we had a safe injection site, at least we knew that people wouldn't be dying like in like stairwells, like someone just happened, and where that was the case. And so I think it would definitely be a great idea to do that.
What role has unofficial safe injection sites, unofficial tent cities, and other unofficial programs done to help street workers, and how can they be geared to help street workers?
Well, one, they've helped with housing, and just got the street workers off the street. Once you get into a place, once you get housing, it falls into place slowly but surely from on there from that point on. You know, like if you don't have a house, you're not gonna want to get clean because if you get clean and then you get back out of treatment, then where are you gonna go? You're gonna go back to the streets because you have nowhere to go. You know, so it's just an ongoing circle. But once you get housing, it's it's pretty much a go from there. Um, and I think that's where Tent City is a huge help for us. Like, you know, yeah, people might think it's just staying in tents and just whatever, but it's not. It's about raising awareness for the homeless and just, you know, speaking for all of our people, you know. And personally, I support 100% support the Tent City.
Give us some of your experience of being homeless, some of the problems you have accessing services, accessing hospitals, and how do doctors treat you when you go in with the abscess or something?
Well, when you go into a hospital, they ask you if you use drugs. Now, it really depends on what your answer is, but in the long run, they're gonna either find out either way. But, like, once they find out that you're an IV user, they treat you like a junkie, they treat you like a piece of garbage that doesn't deserve to live. Like, it's just so inhumane how they treat you because they don't look at us like anyone else. We're um, like we're some kind of disease or that, you know, we're not worth living or something. So I don't know. But I think that the healthcare is shitty, and I think the way that the cops treat us is inhumane because it's really bad. So.
Do any other people have any questions for her before we move on to the next speaker?
I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will talk about building alternatives, particularly a community center. The purpose of this forum is revolution versus reform. Revolution being engaging the people themselves as opposed to these charities that like give you a piece of food and a pat on the head and this and this. So he will talk about a revolutionary initiative we want everyone to take up.
Yeah, so I guess what he's talking about there is what we want to do is build a community for homeless people and that. Lately, you know, homelessness has become like erupted everywhere. There's homeless people. We're sleeping in churches and getting kicked out of places, getting trespassing tickets, and so I've been looking around, and there's some. The thing is there's some polluted land. We used to make gasoline out of coal here back in the days, and they would do something to the coal. I don't know, get gasoline out, and then it would left this bitumen shit left over. And they just threw it in just threw it out the door, you know. So there's a whole area back there where I don't know if you know, at the corner of King and Victoria. There's a school of pharmacy right there. You go behind there, there's a factory on Joseph Street that's closed down, and there's a huge, like, open area, and it's polluted. Nobody's gonna ever. It can't be occupied, except for maybe we could do it. You know? There's also a big factory. There's some other buildings that could be useful as well, and they've like almost kind of cut it off from the world. And so I want to try and get a hold of this factory. We even figured out if we took, you know, I can't remember how many was it, 30 or something. I don't know. It was like 21,000 a fucking month here. If we get 350 a month out of, like, you know, several people, It's like $21,000. Right? I lost my calculator. But I think we can get a hold of this, this factory and this. So what it is this whole area is got a pinch point, so it can be guarded or something. You know what I mean? Like it's only one entrance, like a small, and you could occupy that space and keep the whole place secure, I guess, or whatever. So it's also, I also kind of want to put a fight ring in there. We have like people want to fight, you got to go in the ring. If you want to, have a fist fight, and maybe we can even sell some tickets to those fights or whatever. I don't know. I got some people that will supply drinks and food and stuff like that for to sell at the place. But I want it to be, the thing is, because the homeless people are just everywhere now, just everywhere, right? And people are pissed. I'm sleeping in this Ultimate Rock doorway because it's got an overhang for the rain, and people would walk by like, this ain't a fucking hotel, some guy says, right? And some just negative comments, right? The police rolled up on me the other day. I was sitting there, and they rolled up on a unmarked SUV, and they pull over, jump out, start calling me disgusting. You know what I mean? They're like, you're disgusting, you fucking, you know what I mean? Like, and I was kind of, I want to get, so if we get this area, like, we won't be seen by anybody. We'll be like kind of in our, away, out of sight. You know what I mean? Out of sight, out of mind. I think they would like it. I think they would prefer us to be, and that way we would all be in one location, sort of. We'd have to do some sort of like vetting of the people who are allowed in there, and if they do something funny, they get kicked out. You know what I mean? Like, they can't come in. And so I think, and two is just if we get all the people on welfare or whatever, they could use it as an address. We get $350 out of each one, $350 a month. Because rents here are like fucking $700 minimum. So if we get $350 a month out of each person, we could get like, it was $21,000. There was 60 people. If it was 60 people, it would be $21 grand at $350 a piece. Like $21,000, you could do a lot of work with that. $21,000. I mean, I guarantee we could. I figured out the food budget would be only like $1,000. You know what I mean? For all the food, $1,000. So you still have $20,000. You know what I mean? A month left over. It's got to work. I don't know what the status of that building is. We have to get it zoned or whatever. I mean, it'd be nice to just go occupy it, right? Just go have everybody occupy that space instead of maybe in the park. I don't know. But it's kind of wild back there right now. We'd have to get some lawnmower type shit and do a bit of work. I mean, you could go back there now, but it would be better. It would be a lot better if we had like a community. People could fight. If they want to fight, we would fight. If they, whatever they want to do. I think the key to it too is just like, especially here, is just keeping it clean. You can't have shit laying around everywhere. That's when we start to get mad. And I don't want shit laying around. I don't want to live with a big shit pile. You know what I mean? I want to live in a nice area. Now winter though, I don't know what you would do in the winter. I mean, I guess winter tents or something. They do have some, the permanent structures. If we could get the factory, it would be ideal. You could probably fit at least 100 people in there. It's funny because Julie and I were talking about it earlier, and in the paper the other day they announced, we got this great addiction center, and we built it, $500,000 we spent over 9 people it holds. 9. Like, what the fuck? 9. Right? It's not gonna do. That's not gonna work. 9 people. So I don't know. I just want to get something together like that, and have our own sort of justice. Don't let the police in. Block them at that front area. If they want anybody, they gotta like meet them at the gate type thing. You know what I mean? They can't come in. So I don't know. That's basically all I got to say. that's it.
Thank you.
Can you explain to us how this space would empower the people themselves to be the decision makers as opposed to like places like Out of the Cold or House of Friendship or other such things where you have a more paternalistic view?
Well, I mean, we would run it, I guess, by sort of committee type situation where people would have the input and not just be stuck with stupid rules for no reason. The other thing is that I notice a lot of these charities and other organizations eat a ton of the money. Around McDonald's house or something like 8 cents, 6 cents or something of all the donations gets actually to the house, and the rest is eaten by administration. So we wouldn't have, probably those administration costs would be much lower. It would be self-administered, I guess, right? I don't know though. It's going to be difficult because there's a lot of personalities. Some of them might clash. It's going to be hard, but I think it's maybe a good way to go. I did Out of the Cold last year. See, that's the thing too. Is if we could get that building, we could get the contract for Out of Cold. And so we'd be getting the money for that too. And that's a big contract. I don't know. Then they had I think 30 beds or so. 30. It's just mats on the floor. And they give us a granola bar in the morning and a juice box. You know what I mean? And that's all we got. And they got a fucking pile of money. You know what I mean? It was all eaten up by it. They had 3 people working there. You know what I mean? Like other people. It was just ridiculous, right? They just eat the money all night long. But I don't know. I think we could get that because the contract is up for bidding. So. If we run it to my committee, I guess, let everybody have the input that they want, it would be probably more.
So recently there was a newspaper article talking about the 40 plus something $1 million that was given here to Kitchener to deal with addictions and poverty. And the statement was whether or not someone is addicted, they have a need to housing and stuff. After a closer look, it turned out that these people only had 9 beds. What could we do with that money, given that we're doing this here, Tent City, with nothing?
Well, I mean, I guess one thing. It's not crazy. The fentanyl addicts. Talking about $10,000 worth of fentanyl at once. You know what I mean? It would cut, because there's a pyramid, you know what I mean? It's this pyramid, and it would cut that whole thing out. It would flatten the pyramid, right? It'd be like $2 a point. You know what I mean? If you buy it at this quantities. I think I get a kilo from a research lab in China for about 10,500. A kilo, right? That's 1,000 points. No, that's 1,000 grams. It says 10,000 points. You know what I'm saying? 10,000 points. Like, fuck, get high. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't have to pay. Fuck off. Just flood that shit. And put them dealers out of business, man. Because it's just too many people in the pyramid coming down, treating us like shit, adding fuck all to it, or doing some bullshit. You know what I mean? You gotta have the buying power. And that's really the point of it, is the buying power. The price just goes down. When you get up around 10,000, the price is fucking, you know what I mean? Like, price per point is just really low. If you stay in the 8-ball range or whatever, you're paying through the nose. If you buy a lot, you flatten that pyramid out. I don't know. Escobar might come for us though. Hey, you're taking my brothers, man. I don't know. That's what I would like to do.
Any other questions anyone has?
You said out of sight, out of mind. to be there? How does that make you feel to like, basically to feel like the only way that you could find a solution would be to like withdraw yourself from the general society? Like,
You know, I know Jesus said, you know, be in the world but not of the world, right? So you know what I mean. I thought, you know, it would be. I don't want to be a part of the society. I don't want it. Fuck them motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? Like, for real. Fuck them. You know what I mean? So if I could get some place that, you know what I mean, that's like almost kind of like a self-governed. You know what I mean? Because I hate these fucking policemen and all this bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be nice to just be able to fucking do what you want. You know what I mean? Like, we're back there and nobody says shit about nothing, right? And if you want to, there'd be a ring. If you want to fight, or whatever, you're gonna be a dick or whatever, go get in the ring. Do it. You know what I mean? Like, go do it if that's what you're about. You know, you have to put some rules in place about that shit. But until you prevent people from just get fucking snookered by, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause there's some beatings going down around here. Like, but you know, I don't know. It would be hard. It would be definitely hard, but and I couldn't hit anybody with my stick, so that's bad. I like hitting people with the stick. You know, pay up, it'd work better, but I guess I could fight them with my hands.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Julian and the other organizers up at Tent City for inviting me here, inviting my group here. I was asked to talk about the workers, to talk about the student movement as well. These are very different kinds of issues as relating to what has been talked about so far, which is more related to urban poor organizing, sex worker organizing, drug addict organizing. There is a relationship between all those things. The working class, there's a traditional definition. Traditional definition goes something like, yeah, those are the people who work, they produce stuff, they render services, but it's larger than that. Somebody who doesn't own anything, somebody who doesn't have decisional power in society, somebody who doesn't own the means of production, who doesn't own a fucking factory, who doesn't own 10 cars, who doesn't own like a fucking vacant lot or anything. Those people, they are working class. They are people who are not in power in the society. They have different kinds of issues. Maybe you're working 12 hours a day in a fucking factory and you can't do anything in your own free time. Maybe you don't have fucking money. Maybe you're on dope. Those are all connected issues, and that's why I accept to talk about this particular topic at this conference. So personally, I'm with the Young Socialists for People's Power. We're a Montreal and Quebec based group. We have branches in a few cities around Quebec. What we're trying to do is to get the youth organized. We're working with students, we're working with young workers, with young unemployed people. Most of our members are drifting between these categories as the months come and go. I worked in factories for the last 3 years. Now I'm going back to school. We've had people drop out of fucking school. People are moving around, and we have to understand working class issues broadly if we want to be able to organize these people. Because if we keep a narrow perspective, a strictly economistic perspective, where it's like, yeah, you have to have a stable job, we're not gonna get it done. The topic that Comrade Julian introduced is reform and revolution. I want to come to that from my own organizing experience. So when we're working with students, we have an issue. Students have a very, very limited conception of the social reality. Like, the people here know where it's at. People who have been in the streets, or the people who have worked their entire lives, they know at least some degree of the real social issues that we face here. And those are the issues that affect the majority in Canada. The students don't really have that perspective. They have an academic perspective. They might know about street worker issues from an academic perspective. They can know about drug use issues from an academic perspective. That's not the real deal, and they will not be able to find the solutions by themselves. And it's true for working class issues as well, more broadly. One project on which I've worked with another organization in the past was the summer of the factories. So we wanted to do working class organizing. What we had was a bunch of students. A bunch of students who were highly motivated, highly interested in this kind of work, and they had no idea what to do. The thing we did is we sent them for the summer to work in minimal wage industrial jobs. Sent them to factories, to warehouses, to service jobs, but we focused on jobs that students don't usually do. Why? Because we wanted to ground them in this reality, in this understanding of what's actually up, what's happening, and what we can do about it. And it worked. We produced very good organizers by putting these highly motivated young people in contact with material reality. So the central question of the question of reform and revolution as it relates to workers' issues is real power versus what I could call fake power. It's either we build our own community power, we build our own revolutionary base, and we take things into our own hands, like people here are trying to do as relating to drug issues and housing issues, or else we can be very combative, we can do demonstrations and whatever, and still ask the government to do something about it. That's the thing. What we need is to clear the space for us to act. That's real power. Fake power is if we let the charities do it, if we let the government do it, because they're gonna fuck it up. They're gonna keep us on a leash. I've been involved with the student movement for a long time before going to work in factories and warehouses. The student movement in Quebec is fucking big. It's huge. It's at one point in 2012 it was able to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people. To achieve what? To achieve basically nothing. They were fighting for free tuition. Did they get it? They did not get it. And if they got it, what would it have meant? It would have meant a very slight change in how people get education, in how people rise up the ranks of society. It would not have meant a fundamental transformation for most of us. That's the kind of fake power I'm talking about. Since I've been doing working class organizing, one aspect I've been trying to figure out, which is hard to figure out in my opinion, is the question of unions, trade unions, industrial unions, whatever. So there are two sides to the issue. The first side is quite important, and it's a real representation of that real power I'm trying to tell you about. It's shop floor organizing. It's when you get together with your colleagues and you decide that, yeah, we're making this place run, we're gonna set the rules, we're gonna use that power to decide collectively. And that's a very small step, but that's a first step towards taking this kind of power away from the rich, away from the ruling classes, and back into our hands at all levels of society. But there's a second aspect. It's an aspect that is not always present, but that is often present, and that is a real issue. Is that the trade union movement is highly institutionalized. And this institutionalization often makes it go more towards the side of this fake power, of this inability to really take matters into our own hands, into being combative without actually taking the power, without actually deciding. An example of this from my own experience is that the only workplace where I've been that was unionized, we never did see the union officials. We never did hear anything about it. We knew it existed. We had to sign a card and pay dues. We didn't get anything out of it, and the most important thing is that we did not get this democratic process of deciding for ourselves, setting our goals, and organizing to get them. So at that point, yeah, we're all organized, but it's completely fake. It's useless because we're not getting anything out of it. And I think that's very similar to what has been talked about just before me in relation to drug issues, to housing issues, is if we're letting the charities do it, if we're letting the government programs do it, if we're not able to just take that into our own hands and get the maximum of resources to do it, it's gonna become nothing more than another branch of the government, another branch of the ruling class power. And we're gonna have gained what? Maybe a bit better conditions in the immediate, that's something, but that's not, it's far from being everything, it's far from being essential. So, the one phrase that I've been told by a comrade who I respect very much is that when you're trying to organize to get what you want and get what you need, the question you have to ask yourself is, does it weaken the state? Does it weaken the ruling class, or does it reinforce them? If you're giving on environmental issues, for instance, if you're just asking the government to move on these issues, what you're doing is you're giving them more power. You're asking them to use that power in a given direction, but we're not getting much out of it. And that's true for every issue. Labor relation boards, they can help us sometimes, but for the most part, they just represent another branch of their power. So another way of putting it is, our organizing has to create people's power. If it doesn't create it, it's not doing much for us. It's doing something in the very short term, and that's it. And we have to move beyond that, because we've been doing that for hundreds of years, and we've never gotten much out of it. So the second part of that line of thought that I want to get to is that in any area, and especially as it relates to the workers, the work on the ground, the political organization on the ground is what's important. That's what the people at Tent City are doing with urban poor people. That's what the best working class organizers are doing in workplaces. If we don't manage to get in contact with people to build these strong networks of resistance and to organize democratically, we're not gonna win. If we wait for somebody else to do it for us, we're not gonna win. If we want to have a union vote, if we want to have some bureaucracy stepping in, it's not gonna do much for us. That's a point I've been hammering since the beginning of this presentation, and that I'm gonna keep repeating and keep repeating. So what's the revolutionary path? What's a path that's not reformist? What's a path that brings us where we need to be? First, there's the question of unity across sectors. That's part of why we're here. So, Young Socialists for People's Power, we are student and working class organizers, and we're doing mostly issues relating to workplace issues and to organizing the students. We're here because we want to build links with the urban poor, with people who are surviving just barely, with people who are on drugs, because they're part of our class, and we want to support their struggle, and we know we need the support of these people as well. We will not be able to win if we remain divided, and if some fucking factory worker thinks he's better than a drug addict and thinks he's just a fucking junkie, if these people think they're better than the homeless or whatever. So another part of it is grounding in class issues. We have to select real issues. We have to know that people want to get organized around them, and we have to simply give them the tools to do it. We have to always keep in mind that it's our power or their power. There's no middle ground. We will not be able to share power with the rich. It's either them or us. That's how it goes. Relating to workers organizing, I want to stress that acting and organizing in production spaces and in distribution spaces, in workplaces, it's a tactic, but it's not some sort of moral imperative. It is something that we have to do because a lot of our power as a class is there, because that's where we can paralyze the economy. That's where we can strike the enemy where it hurts them. But we have to organize outside of these issues as well. We have to organize on housing as it relates to an enormous number of people. In Montreal, we have serious issues with housing, and Kitchener, I'm not even gonna get into it. That's why there is a Tent City. That's why there is all this organizing happening. And on every distinct issue of every sector, we have to keep these questions in mind. And finally, I would like to stress something that's maybe less immediate, maybe less material, but that I think is important, that I think shines through in the presentations we've heard before. Our organizing is largely a matter of dignity. What we're trying to do is get control over our lives, and be able to decide democratically what we as different sectors of society, what we as poor or working people want society to look like. What we're trying to do is to get the power to get what we fucking need. And that's the essential point here. The question of safe supply of drugs, of safe injection sites, of housing, that's a question of dignity. That's why these people have been organizing, and that's why we support them. The question of workers' power in the workplace is also a question of dignity, because when you're not organized, what you are is essentially a slave. You have to respond, you have to do what you're told. If not, you end up on the street with the rest. When your lives depend on somebody else and their decisions, well, you don't have dignity and you don't have freedom, and that's why we want to fight. That's why we're here. So even though our situations as urban poor, as poor workers, as students, as higher paid workers are often very different. I mean, I must admit the realities of Tent City are fucking 100 miles from my realities in my daily life. Even though there are these differences, our objectives are the same. It's to get power and to get this freedom, to get organized, to take the power, and to get the dignity we need, and to get decision over how we run our lives. And because of this, we must have unity and we must work together and support each other. Very happy to be here. I want to congratulate the Kitchener people on their good organizing work. You're doing exactly what's needed. So, all power to the people.
Let's get free.
Okay, my name is Julian Ickham. I've been organizing since I was 13. I remember coming home and staying up till 1 o'clock. I still stay up late. The reason for this is I grew up in a family of 6 kids, moms, dad, grandma, aunt, uncle, anyone who would come from the village. And my dad was the one who was working. He didn't get a raise since he came to this country, which has been several decades. He brought in the union, right? Because growing up in socialist Romania and hearing stories about like the struggles in Ireland, the union is a thing. The first thing the union did was it sold out the workers. And so then there was this bigger union, the CAW, that was supposed to be much more militant. My dad was like, yeah, I'll bring in the CAW. He brought in the CAW, and the CAW screwed him over. Buzz Hargrove wasn't the revolutionary he pretended to be. He built everyone to a general strike against Mike Harris, then demobilized everyone to vote for the NDP. My dad was forced to take a forced retirement under Mike Harris with a paycheck of $800 to support a month to support 6 kids, moms, dad, grandma, aunt, uncle, anyone who came from the village. I make more on welfare right now than my dad made and my dad makes at this point in time, which is a serious issue. Growing up, I grew up in the crack neighborhood, and crack was the epidemic that came up in the early 90s. The RCMP was brought down, and the city created this fake community group. It wasn't a real community group, but it was run by a slumlord who was also a city councilor named Karen Harrison Taylor, who pushed forward for most of the gentrification. When I wrote an article against this, she tried to get me arrested. So when I became political, I had several strikes against me. One, I was an immigrant, right? Not only was I an immigrant, I was an immigrant of a hated ethnicity here in the Queen's Colony. 2, I was poor, growing up on Madison. Being poor means that the police needs to know who you are. They would stop, they would check you, they would run your name. If you didn't have a record, they would do whatever they could to give you a record just so they could know who you are, right? And the role of the police was to patrol and control. And it was interesting because you had the drug dealers that didn't live in the East End, who were white, who were rich, and had no addiction problems. And then you had the addicts and the poor people who were trying to escape their misery of working 15 hours, 16 hours, you know, for a paycheck of $800. despite the fucking political unions that were supposed to mobilize the people that never did. 3, I was at that point in time, from 12 to 19, a drug user. I would come home, I would see my dad, a beaten man, sit in front of his computer, drink his beer. He was never violent, and that kind of pissed me off because I wanted him to hit me. I wanted him to smash it. I wanted him to get angry. At least that would mean he was alive. Instead, he would sit there, a broken man, with his beer by himself, you know, crying himself to sleep because he couldn't provide for his families, but he did the best he could for that. And that is what made me a socialist. Seeing my friends being beaten and shot by police because of the color of their skin during the war on drugs. Seeing my dad coming home every night broken, you know, saying to himself, I don't know why we left Romania, I don't know why we left Europe to come here to be treated like fucking shit. My dad went to Princeton, you know, and he has 2 PhDs, and he ended up scrubbing toilets for a living, which shows this isn't a meritocracy. He would be like the most humiliating things. You have these people who are now city councilors who are working for the fucking hospital, and they couldn't fucking read a thing, and my dad, an educated person, would wash the toilets, and they would come back and be like, Dumitru, you missed the spot. And just seeing that look in his eyes of a broken man, I said, I never want to be that, and I don't want anyone else to be that. So I looked around my community. I identified the class enemies, who were the city councilors, who were the slumlords, who were the big drug dealers that make us feel like fucking shit and exploit us. I'm not talking about users who sell drugs to get by. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people who don't live in our neighborhoods, who come in our neighborhoods, who get arrested for large quantities of drugs, sexual assault, and walk, while people here get arrested for 6-7 points, which is 6-7 injections of fentanyl, and are looking at 14 years in jail. Just a side note, the whole fentanyl crisis is a state invention. I remember in the early 2000s and 2010s, after I got off the G20 charges, all my friends were dying of fentanyl overdoses. At that point in time, you didn't have the powdered fentanyl coming in, you had the patches. And the patches, I had a patch at one point in time, had a barcode with your name on it, so it's not like giving, and if they found someone else with it, you would be fucked. So it's not like me giving you some of my oxys. This, if you get caught with, has my name on and stuff, and it can be directly whatever. So magically, you had this fucking powdered fentanyl showing up in the streets and people dying. This drug was showing up in weed at our 10 cities previously. I've seen people overdose on weed because it was laced with fentanyl. They came back with naloxone. People, like, fentanyl would end up in ecstasy. Fentanyl would end up in all these fucking drugs. Now tell me, you're a fucking drug dealer. A dime bag costs $20. A point of Fetty back then cost $40. Who in their right mind would put something that costs $40 in a $10 bag and sell it to you for $10? No one, right? So that when people turn on the television, they hear the word fentanyl, they associate it with people dying. Then they bring the price of fentanyl down, they get rid of fucking heroin, they make pills obsolete, and they start arresting people for selling it, who are doing it just to fucking get by. This is creating the crisis to solve the crisis. So in 2010, our whole thing was like, get fentanyl out of the drugs. We're beyond that. Fentanyl isn't all the drugs. People are addicted to fentanyl. To start fucking putting like these huge prison terms on people for fentanyl is fucking bullshit. It's a way of fucking state control. Which, as I was saying earlier, it's the whole thing they want to do with everything. You know, the unions collaborate with the bosses. The fucking police and the landlords collaborate for these fake war on drugs. And we're the fucking victims. It's our fucking blood that fucking dies. Since I've been working as an organizer, at least more than 90 friends of mine in the last few years have died from this fucking fentanyl fucking crisis. This crisis that was created by the fucking state. Now, we're pushing for a safe injection site. We're pushing for safe supply. We're not just pushing for safe supply, we're doing safe supply. We're fucking, as an organization, not one individual. What I mean by that is we'll make sure people get things that are safe, as opposed to fucking drugs with like caffeine for people who have like heart conditions, or fucking, you know, Xanax, having like fentanyl show up as Xanax and that sort of thing. So this is a fucking reality. We have a proposal to solve the drug problem. Our proposal was created by interviewing 500 people. We have a four-pronged approach. One, give us 2 buildings. One building that's a dry space where we have cultural events, where we have community events, like where we have hip-hop shows like we had earlier here today, to keep young people off of drugs. You know, over there we would have educational classes, we would have a free school, different things. 2, for those who are addicted, a fucking building where you have a safe injection site, where you have a drug supply, a safe drug supply, and people can get it and go on with their lives. Methadone is one of the most addictive substances, but it's saving people's lives because they don't need to go on the street to get it. 3, fucking in this place we would have people and teach people to advocate for people who are cut off by welfare and ODSP. The only difference keeping people in a house or a fucking tent. And there's several other things. You can find this on my Facebook, julianickham.wordpress.com. Now we're here today because we want to talk about, you know what, 3 years ago when we started this fight, people said there will never be a fucking safe injection site in Kitchener. Now it's opening up. 3 years ago, people said we were crazy for advocating this shit. Now this is what people are talking about, safe supply. 3 years ago, people said we would fall flat on our face. We're here. Every year we've had a tent city and we've put people in housing. Not because the city and everyone is nice, but because we mobilize and we fucking fight. And we fight to fucking win. So, what are we here to do? We're here to solve the housing crisis, we're here to solve the drug crisis, and we're here to solve the capitalist crisis, which is the cause of all these fucking crises. Now, we were supposed to have Tent City yesterday at 4:30. Due to extenuating events that were none of our doing, but we could say were the doings of the state, this hasn't happened. Chaos engulfed instead, and yet at the same time, we're here, despite all the fucking things. So now that we're here, let's get together, let's fucking solve the workers' crisis, let's solve the drug crisis. And we can only solve it by making the people themselves become the decision makers. My comrade talked about like the Joseph Street location and our need to fight for that. That will be our base. That will be where we will run a safe injection site that serves the interests of the people. That will be the place where we run our fucking programs to teach people camera skills, you know, to teach people writing, to teach people the basic skills that they fucking need. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break, a lunch break. When we come back, we're going to read a message from Ireland as well as Vandu about what they're doing and about the idea of dual power, which is what we're building. Now, what is dual power? When someone gets cut off welfare, they don't go to the member of the parliament and beg and grovel the same way someone begs and grovels to the priest to intercede with God. No, we're not here to do that. We're here to solve these crises ourselves, right? That's what dual power is. People come to us when they get cut off welfare. People come to us when CAS goes on. People come to us when we're under attack. And these 2 letters from Vandu and the 32 CSM will talk about that, dual power, which is what we are building. A lot of people in Kitchener have been like, why do they let you get away with that? It's not about letting us get away. we fight, we take what is ours. And on that note, we're going to go and get dinner, get lunch ready, and then we're going to come back, read these 2 messages, break up into groups, come back and implement discuss the decisions and implement them. Thank you.
Yeah.